So we're going to have a panel that comes up and talks about some of the challenges and opportunities around sustainable ag, as it relates to the Treasure Valley. I guess that's probably really important for people to know. So as you know, we got Ray on the panel, world-renowned soil scientist and rancher from
Come
Missouri.
on up, Ray.
We got Brad McIntyre, the owner-operator of McIntyre Farms. I would say the genesis of the Carbon Summit started at his ranch at the Soil Health Academy. So Brad is the owner of McIntyre Pastures. Then we have Katie Baker. Come on down. She's the executive director of FAIR Idaho. FAIR is a nonprofit organization creating a more equitable future for small-scale food and beverage providers and farmers and ranchers. George Nelson is a business development specialist for Digester Doc. I think George is right out here in the hallway, and then we have
George.
Rick Naerebout. Rick is the chief executive officer for the Idaho Dairymen's Association, who represents nearly 500 farms and ranches across Idaho. So let me go grab George real quick.
Okay, let's do it. I'm going to guess, too, that even though he said we're going to talk about the Treasure Valley, these things are probably global, too. I mean, I'm going to think there's a lot of themes about what we're talking about, no matter where you are, no matter where the soil is, although obviously there's some differences. So, yeah, we've got some questions. Let's get you. Are we missing one chair? We need una más. You want to grab one more chair, yep. Jason? Because we want you a part of this as well. All right, we're going to share microphones a little bit, take some of these questions. Maybe start us off, Ray. Why don't you just, give us a line or two about your thinking in this moment, just kind of start us off. You said some profound things earlier, so I'm just going to, throw the mic at you.
Well, you put me in a spot here. The way I think about it, look, I've been very fortunate. I got to travel the whole country. I've been in every state 2 or 3 times, from Canada to Mexico. And what I've started noticing was a pattern that it wasn't just myself that had a misunderstanding. It was a lot of us that we weren't the way we were taught. And it was amazing to me that we weren't taught the goal and build agriculture on the right premise. And the premise should been, how do you emulate nature? How do you mimic it? How do you work with it? I wasn't taught that premise. My premise was, and we can relate to this, is it's all about yield. It's about control. Nature's working against me. I got to worry about insects. I got to work with pressure, and I understand that because I'm telling you, being a sheep guy, raising sheep, I lost sheep to wolves. So, but the thing is, I started to learn how to work with the natural system. But my whole point here is changing the way I looked at the natural system. And I was shocked in college that we didn't teach more of our students, our agronomy students, more ecology. So I was kind of taken by that. So I noticed no matter what university you went to, that was the majority of the thing. So I guess if we could start talking about agriculture, build on the right premise, and maybe you can tell us how you learned agriculture.
Yeah, it has been a big mental change. And going back to the first comment was, this is about the Treasure Valley here in Idaho, but I think that what connects us worldwide is we're talking about soil, and that's everywhere. Gabe Brown always says that, well, I can't do it in this place, and he says one common thing is we have soil, and we can all change, and we can all work with soil better and do better. And but that was the biggest thing for me is changing the way I saw things, because I was always trying to attack things. As farmers, we woke up and we're like, what do we got? What's getting us today? Like, figure out what's the problem, and we're trying to fix problems, and we got to see it as the bigger picture of what's working with us, and try to get things to work with us and make our job easier instead of trying to kill something every day.
I'm going to have you guys get right up into that microphone when you're on. There you go. All right. And some questions that you want to start us off with, Jason, today.
Yeah, I would say one of the first ones is from a local level, it's like, how do we start this paradigm shift? So you guys have done it, locally, at your farm and ranch, but how is the peer pressure, amongst the farmers and ranchers, like to where, I had talked to your dad a little bit about that, and getting over that peer. Only way to put it is peer pressure of how do you handle that, and how did you move forward, and where do you see us going to kind of make this mainstream?
Peer pressure, social pressure, whatever you want to call it, it's real and it still happens today. The neighbors drive by and snicker and do their whole thing, but at the end of the day, we got to keep sharing the message. We invite them over. We have conversations on the ditch bank, and we're advocates. Every day we're advocates, and sharing the message. Whatever industry we're in, whatever we're talking about, we got to talk about the positive aspects and what we're seeing, and I think that's the biggest thing. What are we seeing that's so exciting? And we got to be excited about it. We got to be positive about it, and we got to teach. And it's not only the neighboring farmer. It's everyone that we're in contact with. I sell meat and eggs to the public, and so this Friday we're having a farm day, and there I'm going to give a soil demonstration because I need my customers to understand how soil works, for them to understand that what they're eating is better, and it helps them connect. But not only that, now they can teach their children, their grandchildren, they can teach their neighbors. And so we got to keep sharing our knowledge, and it's constant. I know, because it takes a lot of time, as Ray knows. I don't know what the percentage is when Ray speaks that people actually grab it and go home and do something about it, but it's probably
less than
low.
2%.
Yeah, I would say our next question is probably for Rick. With the Idaho Dairymen Association, you got 500 and some farmers and ranchers that work under your association or with it. And so you guys have some 2050 stewardship goals coming up about like moving towards net zero or greenhouse gas emissions reductions. You want to tell us a little bit about what that looks like?
Sure, and this is not just an Idaho goal, this is a industry-wide U.S. goal. And I would say it's bigger than peer pressure, it's consumer pressure. It's not that we have a choice of doing this, we have to figure out a way to get to net zero. We didn't say, okay, we want to do this because for all the altruistic reasons. I mean, let's be honest about it. Consumers are demanding to know more about how food is produced and want to feel good about those purchases. So we said, okay, European Union, New Zealand, all our major world competitors have already put the flag out there and said we're going to be net zero by 2050. So the U.S. dairy industry, April of last year, we also put our flag in the ground and said, okay, we're going to get there too. What's that mean? For us, it's net zero at the farm gate. So how do we get to net zero carbon emissions at the farm gate? And with that, you're going to also get complementary benefits looking at improved water quality and soil health. As you're implementing those technologies to get to net zero carbon, you're going to also get the complementary benefits of the other two. One of them would be, this is complex. It's not just being able to add a methane digester or add cover cropping or no-till. You've got to have a whole suite of practices for us to get to net zero. And some might argue, well, that's exactly why we need meatless Mondays and we don't need animal agriculture, is because it takes a whole suite of practices. The reality is the U.S. dairy industry accounts for 3% of the total carbon emissions in this country. We provide far more in terms of 3% of total calories and total protein that the average consumer consumes on a daily basis. The beef industry is going to be much the same. We're lockstep with the beef industry. Our animals take a career change at some point in their lives, and so we're part of the beef industry as well. And so it's getting people to realize, as you're looking at measuring, how sustainable is a food product, you have to measure it against calories and protein and other nutrients, not just measure it against volume. And that's got to be a key thought process. But for us, it takes a whole suite of practices. Right now, as I look at the possibility of a dairy producer today being able to get to net zero, at best, it's about a $35 to $40 million investment to implement all the technology needed to be able to get there. That's what's being asked of us, is figure out how to have your average dairy producer afford that kind of an investment. And that's just a tough thing to figure out right now. That's partly why we gave ourselves a 30-year runway to figure this out, is we know technology costs are going to come down, but this is a very complex situation.
You know, what is the role, I guess, from the industry side, what role does the government play in that, you know, for you guys, not only just mandating, you know, some of those stringent policies, I guess you could say, but how can they help facilitate you guys getting to that on goal, I guess you could say?
Yeah, definitely incentivizing technologies and also funding research. You know, we have a great land grant system in our country in terms of research institutions that work with agriculture, that's trusted by agriculture. Infuse those research institutions with the right funding so that they can perform the research needed to figure out the answers to the questions that we have as producers and as society. They're that trusted group. We also have USDA Ag Research Service. Some of the best work we've done has been with USDA Ag Research Service in Kimberly, Idaho. They've got a great research station there with excellent researchers. As you reflect on the previous speaker's comments about rebuilding soil health and not just, you know, maintaining status quo, but rebuilding, one of the things that we've got some great peer-reviewed research on is when you look at our soils in south central Idaho, and if you're going to cover crop and no-till, you do get some benefit, but you get an exponential return if you add manure to the equation. And regardless of the tillage or the cover crop or the other treatments, you add manure to the equation and your return is exponential. And it's information like that we need people to recognize more readily, to understand that, hey, you know, farmers 100 years ago had it right when they started having cattle so that they had fertilizer for their fields to use as a soil amendment. They knew what they were doing. The soil hasn't changed, the chemistry, all of that hasn't changed, just our mentality that's changed to somehow have people be fearful of manure. It's a great soil amendment.
And so I think this might be a good question for Katie. From the consumer standpoint, what are you seeing in the restaurants or the local grocery stores? Are you seeing consumers wanting to, you know, support people that or ranchers and farmers that are doing sustainable regenerative ag? Are they demanding that quite yet? Are you seeing that a lot more?
Yeah, it was interesting when I came into this position because during COVID, when I was looking at the numbers, organics went up 20%. But also, I think, you know, and Brad can probably speak to this, I order Brad's products and the truck comes to my door. It's a beautiful thing. So, but I think that, you know, our organizational structure is unique at Fair Idaho because we represent everything from family farms to independent restaurants, independent retailers, so like your farmers markets, your co-ops, and that kind of thing. So we're really representing the local food system from field to fork. And I think that with Fair Idaho, it was a unique opportunity to bring our restaurants, our farmers markets, our co-ops to the discussion with our farmers so that they can best understand what products are in demand and what they can do in the future. And so, you know, I think the one thing I keep thinking about as I'm in this world now is that our farmers, our sort of secret mission at Fair Idaho is to help the business model of the farmer, because then you help them preserve their agricultural land, and then we can talk about soil health and what's going to happen and how we can, you know, help our environment. And so anyway, we are having those conversations, and I do think that people absolutely want to know where their food is coming from. And I think this, the millennials have, you know, an increased awareness, and I think we have to absolutely pay attention to that.
This might be a question for George. When you talk about, I guess, raising standards across an industry, where do you see the efficiency, you know, I guess, gains potentially for, you know, kind of with what you guys do at Digester Dock, and how can you help, I guess, maybe catalyze or expedite, you know, reaching some of these goals?
Right. Yeah, so the big thing that we've been working on is understanding the biology and the chemistry and how that plays in the methane digesters, and how we can make that investment of $30 million, $40 million on the farmer have a better return and have it return back to their and to the lenders faster, and so it becomes a more sustainable process. And the great thing with those methane digesters is not only are you getting the RNG and making a profit on that, and then your carbon intensity score goes down, your end product coming out of the back end of the digester is a great soil amendment too. So now you end up with more money coming in, but also a great soil amendment going onto the land. And by doing, don't move that hand, by doing so, you're also making that, like I said, that big investment just come down and making everything more feasible for the dairymen.
I guess the next part I want to get to is oftentimes people have kind of a misunderstanding of cattle, and I know that Ray, you kind of touched on that. I think cattle and the herbivores are critically important for us being able to get back to that equilibrium. So what would you say to people that want to do the meatless Mondays, and they kind of want to villainize, I guess you could say, the cattle? What would we say to them, to say, hey, for sustainable solutions or moving towards sustainable regenerative ag, how do we got to treat the cattle? How do we feel about cattle?
Well, shoot, I've been very fortunate. Just recently, I got to consult on a 20,000 acre organic dairy, and where they're actually pasture grazing the cows out there. And the whole organization is trying to respond, and it's incredibly important that the cattle, people don't realize the connectedness with cattle and the plant. They need each other. Your soil can't function without it. And so what we're trying to do is teach. Now we got new soil tests that are like the Haney test, where we can cut the amount of manure out there, because what's happening a lot of times, we over apply manure and we don't use it correctly. It's an incredible tool, and it's incredible. The soil needs it, but like anything else, it's all in balance. So when I talk to people like that, I connect with them. I said, look, nature doesn't farm without animals. What part do you not get out of that? That's the way the planet works. That's why we had billions of bison, and people keep complaining about, well, the cows are farting. Well, guess what? We all fart. Every organism, it gives off gas. You're missing the point. It's about understanding how all these organisms serve purpose. They all are intimate and connected to each other. So once you can talk to them in that way and say, look, we are becoming desertified because we don't have animals on the, then they start, you have to talk and communicate with them. And that's one thing I tell them, animals are very critical, extremely critical in the system.
Well, and I would add to that cattle are excellent recyclers. You look at the canola oil in your cupboard that you cook with. The byproduct of that is canola meal. That's protein for cattle. The cotton used to make your clothing. We feed cottonseed to cattle as energy and protein. In Idaho specifically, a lot of you drove past a sugar beet plant as you came to this location. We take the shreds out of that sugar beet plant and we feed it to cattle. We take potatoes that don't make grade for human consumption, we feed that to cattle. There are countless things that we feed to cattle every day that if we didn't have the cow there to be the recycler, they'd all be landfilled. And so we figured out years ago, okay, all these byproducts that otherwise were waste, we figured out how to have a cow convert that to nutrients that are better suited for us. The nutrients we're given a cow through that byproduct are better suited for them. They convert them to nutrients for us. So they are a great recycler, and people often forget as they look at that equation, they leave that piece out of the equation and not recognize that we are feeding these animals a tremendous amount of byproducts that otherwise would go into a landfill or be wasted somewhere else.
One more quick thing is that we're finding out through incredible science, new science now, that if you grass feed these animals, it changes the omega-6, omega-3 complexes, which is healthy for our bodies. And I think there's been a lot of misinformation the last 50, 60 years about fat and meat, which is not correct. And the new science is coming out, no, we need that part of our healthy biome. So it's part of it.
One thing I would speak to as well is I think at times the human race has probably overdone the diet on certain things, but I think it is the only way that we can heal the land. I really believe, like, it's animals and mainly ruminants, and so we have to have a portion of it, and we have to be responsible with what we're consuming. But yeah, the cattle, they're a walking composter. Why not have them out on your land? Ray showed that picture of the grass pad. I mean, it heals right there, and that's what we saw. I'll have a slide in my presentation. When we brought the cattle to the land, everything changed. We were making slow progress, but they make huge impacts when we bring them back.
Is the consumer willing to pay for raising cattle standards, to where we're willing to pay for their quality of life improvements, to where they are going to be pasture raised, they are going to, have more grasses and better, food inputs, I guess you could say, for them to, produce the nutrient density that we're looking for or that we want to raise?
Percentages, a certain amount do, but I go and speak in high schools, and I talk to these kids that the almighty dollar is a vote. And when they buy something through Amazon or at Walmart, they voted. And so when they buy from me, they voted too, because it tells that business what to do. The dairy industry, anybody, whenever you buy it, you vote with it. So if they're super concerned about the earth and about carbon, but they purchase otherwise, well, they voted otherwise.
They voted against that.
So they need to be aware that what they buy does change the world.
Yeah, and I would back that up. And so far, 95% or greater of consumers aren't willing to pay they're not willing to pay that premium to actually see a change in practices. Typically, it's an unfunded mandate for a producer to figure out how to implement. And that's how agriculture has been hamstrung for generations. There's these expectations, we have to figure out how to do them at the farm level and do it with a decreasing margin. And so it becomes very frustrating and problematic at the producer level to have these things thrust upon them and then try and figure out, how do I implement them? Us going out and talking to our members about us setting goals to be carbon neutral by 2050, that's not a popular conversation. That's not a fun conversation as an executive for a producer trade association. It's not typically well received. And so there's a lot of frustration there in the producer community because people have these expectations, but they're typically not willing to pay for them. They want the same price as what they paid yesterday.
People got to understand a lot of these farmers that you're talking about spend millions of dollars in infrastructure. We created this whole construct. And then to blame and call out somebody out, it's not fair. We all created this. So I think that we as a collective need to help, because I work with a lot of big dairies, and to have them, like when I work with them, I help them where I can, so we can infuse more ecology into that. So we go to a no-till, we go to the covers, we manage the nutrients. Helps huge. But the whole thing, it's going to take time. We have to be very patient and help the producer. But you're exactly right. Just to put all the financial burden on them, that's not right.
I don't think that's going to work.
No.
We've been talking, we have a lot of discussions about how do we educate the consumer and our restaurants, our retailers, and it's through the process, we think, of telling stories and letting people know what that farmer is doing that is different. So that farmer story then gets to the consumer, and the consumer is more apt to buy. They feel a connection with that farmer, but then other farmers hopefully read that story and are able to have a greater understanding of how their practices maybe differ from their own, and that the benefit of that. And so I think that's something, like, we just commissioned a piece of, I'm meeting with a journalist actually tonight to write a story about why regenerative agriculture food costs more when you're utilizing those farming practices. Why does it cost more than when you go to Walmart? And so I think it's just telling those stories, and then the individual stories, because I think when people have a connection with where their food comes from, they're going to pay those extra dollars. But it takes like one story at a time, or reaching one individual at a time to make an actual change.
I just got one statement to make about this. Look, one thing people do not appreciate, and I'm going to tell you, I remember giving a talk on water quality, and I was dealing with some of the soybean board and the corn board. Look, what people do not appreciate is you cover it up and say, we're doing the best. People don't appreciate that. And let's be honest, in the past, agriculture had a lot of problems. And to be honest and fair about it, and that's why in Wisconsin, we started being very proactive. The farmers got out there and they appreciated bringing society in, and a lot of them got involved. But the moment you say we don't have a problem, and you just cover it up, it's like the movie Joan C. Wells, don't piss down my back and tell me it's raining. People don't appreciate that. Be honest about it. We've had some water quality issues. We had some of these problems. But again, remember, we all created this construct. But people do not appreciate you just trying to say, it's the best we're doing. No, it's not. Because I dealt with it I was kind of sandwiched in between. I understand giving those talks between the dairy men, the dairy people, and the urbans people. The moment you start doing that, it neutralizes. But when I do my soil demonstrations, guess what? Everybody in the room calmed down. They were all throwing turds at each other, and they were both wrong. But once we told them the whole solution, everybody calmed down. We can't turn against each other. We have to help each other out. So the first part is humility. We all got this wrong. I got it wrong. It's okay. Let's move on from there and let's fix the problem. I have to say that. Because it happens a lot.
And I think we have to do better in agriculture about not saying I'm better than that other producer. We often market by disparaging our competition. The reality is Idaho is very well suited to produce food for far greater than our own population. We have a lot of irrigated acres. We have very few people. We are in a great position to feed many, many more people than what we have in our state. So the size of our farms should not be talked about negatively. The reality is a great year in the dairy industry is $200 to $250 per cow net income. Take whatever salary you might be having to what you take home today, divide that by 250. That's how many cows you would have to milk yourself to have your same salary. It's not a big margin business. And then you have to figure out how to weather the down years where you're losing 100 to 150 a cow. So these aren't big margin businesses. They're high capital intensive businesses. And you've got to figure out how to weather that storm. That's why we continue to drive the size. It doesn't matter whether you're a row cropper, a dairyman, or a cattleman. We continue to drive the size of our farms up because the margins are so thin. And so we have to do better about not disparaging the size of our farms, not talk negatively about our CAFOs. The majority of my members are going to be, if not all of them, are CAFOs. That, to us, that's not a negative term, but it's been created to be this negative term out in the public. And we have to do better to understand that, well, a place like Idaho, we're very well suited. There's a reason we went from not even top 20 to top 3 in states producing milk in the last 30 years. We're very well suited for dairy production. And as long as we're doing it right, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with a 10,000 cow dairy, because I tell you what, they have the capital and resources to do everything better and more efficiently and more effectively than a 50 cow dairy. That's just the reality of the economics, because it all comes down to the almighty dollar.
And just, you know, I think about what we've been trying to do within our organization and reaching out to people that maybe don't share the same views. We're very proud that we're a statewide bipartisan organization. But I have seen some of the, when I got into this position, I think some people were like, maybe avoid that group or whatever. That was the first people I called. Because, you know what, I don't think change is ever going to happen unless you meet people in the middle. If you're not sitting at the same table with that individual, they will never change, I guarantee it. And so I think it's time to really come together and work together as a collective on any shared goals you might have. You're not going to agree on everything, and that I'm very much realistic about. But let's figure out, what do we agree on? Maybe it's livestock processing is a major issue for our mid-sized ranchers. Let's work on that together. And there's other groups that are out there saying, we've identified this as an issue. We're going to partner with them on this shared goal, because we're going to have a greater impact when we all work together and sit down at the table and try to figure out what are these issues that we're all facing and how can we help our farmers.
Yeah, and so from, I guess it leads to the next question on, maybe my statistics are a little off here, but in the 1950s, you know, it was, I think our population, our workforce was 25% in the agricultural sector, and then now today we're less than 2%. What is the national state of our agricultural industry? Like, how is it health-wise? Would you guys say? Anybody want to kind of take that on?
What's your metrics? I mean, are we looking at profitability? I mean, what's your metrics to determine
Well, I
health?
just see the dwindling amount or percentages of people who can do it, and I think it's, you know, becoming really large. You know, what is the role of, you know, maybe the aspiring farmer or somebody who's got, you know, 5 to 10 acres or who wants to get into agriculture? Where do they start? And, you know, how do they get involved?
Let me tell you, I work from people with 1 acre all the way to 100,000 acres. We consult on millions of acres. Here's the thing. The way the current system is, land prices have gone out of the world. Just recently with COVID, it changed everything. There's a reason I went to Missouri. That's the only place I could afford to live. I wanted to come back to Idaho. I lived in Idaho for 5 years. But here's what's happening. I want young people to come into the farming operation. And what's happening is there's no transition going on. We're not educating. And you think about a lot of the young people that grew up on the farm, where did they go? They wanted to be a doctor to a lawyer. There was no room to bring somebody into the operation. I'll give you a case in point. I lived in Weiser, Idaho for 5 years. I had a farmer friend who farmed 500 prime acres in Weiser, Idaho. Some of the best soils in the world. Right here, plenty of water. Could not bring the son into the operation because there was not enough money. Why? Too much cost in inputs. A lot of it is the way we were farming. A lot of it is the way we were ranching. Over application of fertilizers on onions, for example. We were just spending way too much on inputs. My point is, if we go to more of a regenerative model, we can bring more people into the operation. They can afford, because they don't have to go spend all this money on infrastructure, equipment, chemicals. We now have soil tests that we have people now that do not use nitrogen fertilizer anymore. No more phosphorus, no more potassium, because their soils are that healthy. Tell them about your operation, how it changed.
Yeah, so, I mean, we were, you know, a big farm. We're still, I consider ourselves, you know, fairly large. But we started focusing on, you know, regenerative, and we've been able to cut a lot out, and that's through cover crops, that's through proper grazing. And so we've cut over 50% of our inputs on the chemical and fertilizer side, maintaining yields. But it takes a lot more management. It takes a lot, you got to really be thinking forward. And it's not something that, you know, it's nice to be able to just go and fix the mistake. But yeah, you have to have a lot of proper planning, but it is doable. You can bring in more people. You know, there's a lot more people that get more hands-on work now on our type of farm than before, because it was just a lot of tractor work before. I know it's.
How many people does your farm support now? How many families?
There's 3 families that take their, you know, that own the farm, and then there's 2 other families that all their income comes from our farm that are hired hands, and then there's 10 plus other workers.
And before?
Before, we were farming probably double the acres, and then we had a custom haying business, so we had almost the exact same amount of employees covering a lot more land, but we just didn't see people. You know, you'd send them out and you would see them once a week. You know, you were just all over the place. So we actually have the same amount of people, but every day I see every employee. We have interaction. We have meetings in the morning. It's just a whole lot of different. It's a community type.
Were you making money back then?
We were trading money.
Now you're making money.
I always said we bought ourselves a job, and and that's what it's all about, those really small margins, and you're just getting by. So we just got tired of it. It's rough.
Yeah, it's a complex, difficult question. And it comes down to economics, and there's so many more pieces to it than just the soil health aspect and some of the practices. And I grew up in a 75-cow dairy in Michigan, and the year we sold it, I milked every shift for over a year straight because we were all family labor. We didn't have the income to have labor come in, and as you look at that as a young person, if your options are to go to college, get an education, and go get a 9-to-5 that pays better than working 365 days a year, it's a no-brainer. And so you have to, there's a reason that our average farmer is over 55 years old, and you're not having the young farmers in the family come back into it. The margins aren't there. We pride ourselves as a country as having the least expendable income spent on food, but that comes at a price. And as long as that's our motivation, as long as all of our federal policy, I mean, the federal government gave piles of money away to farmers last year. And you know what that did? It increased production for a market where we had decreased consumption because of COVID. And so we oversupplied our market. So you look at our federal policy, and that whole system is broken because we incentivize producers to overproduce. And all that does is depress the price for the next year or two. So it's a big problem that's multifaceted.
You said a beautiful thing there. Being a government employee, our farm programs are broken. Crop insurance has facilitated a lot of the destruction of Western Kansas. Growing corn is you're farming out of ecological context, deflating the prices for everybody else. Crop insurance did that. It was supposed to take some of the risk out, but what it's doing is facilitating the destruction of the land even quicker. CRP, Conservation Reserve Program, where we take land out, what it's doing is causing more rural poverty because now young farmers cannot compete with Conservation Reserve Program. So I want young farmers to come in, but that program, people are getting paid for putting land aside. So where's young people going to be able to fit in that? And so that makes it, our farm programs are very destructive. And that's not a very profitable, that's not a very, how would you say it? It's not a very pleasant message. And think about it, as coming from a government employee, I started seeing that. And it's not a message that people want to hear, but he's right. And we got to fix that. And so right now, if we don't fix that and change how people in Washington, because I understand being a government employee, what an ex-government employee, when you bring that message, it's not a positive message.
Yeah, I guess the next question was on the percentage of water, that we use in agriculture. If we're having these heat waves and these droughts, going across the Southwest and, even in the West Coast, how do we improve or increase our efficiency or utilization, I guess, of water resources? Because it's such an intensive practice. Obviously, we grow all of our food. And so how do we, even at the local level, I guess it's probably more of a regional, even national type of thing, but anybody want to try? How do we improve that?
Well, being an anaerobic digester guy, I'm going to say anaerobic digesters because you can recycle the water that you're using to flush the dairies, and the water that's come out, if you do the process right and if you apply the correct science and technology to it, you're coming out with a very clean, sustainable water. And that's really what we try and push is the science of understanding how to create that clean water and create that renewable resource as one of the end products.
I think the biggest thing is it's not is so much of how much water we're using, it's how we're not cycling the water. We've got a water cycle problem because if the water was put on the land and it properly, like we were shown with that demonstration, if it went through the bread and it came out clean, the water would return in our streams and rivers, and so it's a cycle problem. Yes, we use a lot of water, but it actually will come back cleaner if we have the cycle properly, and with a lot of different ways. But yeah, cattle drink a lot of water. They get a negative thing, consuming too much water. Well, it's then fertilizer, right? If it's all in proper context, it works beautifully.
I used to design irrigation systems for my first 7 years. 1 acre inch is 27,154 gallons. Agriculture uses copious amounts of water. But if we do it regeneratively, start bringing more carbon into the soil, more cover crops, more aggregation. Think about this, 1% increase in organic matter could increase 22 to 25,000 gallons per acre that the soil can hold. It is huge. If we would have started this in the beginning, our problem is not enough carbon in the soil. That's the problem. So when you turn the pivot on, you're tilling the crap out of it, guess what happens? The water runs off. Poor aggregation. Soil's not functioning. This is happening on a national scale. We can't afford that. I grew up in New Mexico. I know arid. So you look at the map for drought in the future for water use. Arizona's in bad shape. New Mexico's even in worse shape. So we're being careless with water. So if we start putting living plants and start fixing the soil like you just talked about, we can save a huge amount of water. We can save up to 50% of our water. We have aquifers that are going in Texas. They're going dry. If we would have started this in the beginning, it would have made a huge impact. So we can help fix this.
Well, and this stat for Idaho is even greater. 95% of our water in Idaho goes to agriculture, just because we're an ag state. But this is one area that Idaho excels. We have a conjunctive management plan where you look at the Eastern Snake Plain Aquifer. It's an aquifer about the size of Lake Erie. And between the water users and state government, we've reached an agreement to recharge that aquifer. And we've actually, in the last few years, increased its depth by over a foot. So instead of looking like the Ogallala in the panhandle of Texas, we've got an ESBA aquifer that's increasing in volume because we've looked at it and said, okay, how do we solve this problem? And this is something that comes unexpectedly from a very conservative legislature and a very conservative Speaker of the House in Scott Bedke and brokering a deal. And so it really strikes at the heart that agriculturalists are the true environmentalists. We had to sit down and figure out, how do we solve this tough problem? We knew we had an aquifer that was depleting. We knew we had over-allocated that aquifer. How do we figure out how to take this river water that we were just sending down the Columbia and out in the ocean, and when we have opportunities where we have a good water year, divert it out in the desert and recharge? And those are the things that are going to make the difference in figuring out, how do we store water underground as opposed to in open reservoirs where it evaporates? Or how do we actually have the tough conversation about figuring out how to get some dams permitted and be able to store, because we're going to have a more complex system with snowpacks melting quicker and faster. We're not going to be able to use the mountains and snow as storage like we have in the past. So we're going to have some really tough conversations, but I would argue Idaho does this better than anybody, and we've been able to demonstrate it through some of the actual things that we've done and projects we've put into place through agriculturalists sitting down and saying, okay, let's figure out how to solve this problem. Let's do it at scale.
Well, let's see what we got. Maybe next. No. I guess it leads into the next question, and you might have even touched on some of that. With the heat waves that are coming, I think even the next one is around kind of drought. What is the Treasure Valley, I guess, seeing with this inclement weather, I guess you could say, or just a little higher temperatures, and like you said, the lack of snowpack, that's going on. Are we sitting okay, here in the agricultural sector? Maybe Brad, how are they doing now?
Well, we just last week got cut on our water about 50% of normal on our allotment, but Yeah, that is a problem, but we have to figure out how to solve it. And I'm so thankful that, in 2009, we chose to go into a no-till situation and improve our organic matter and be able to hold more. We still have a brittle environment, and it still takes water to keep these crops alive. And so, yeah, we can do better. I have pivots now, and I have no-till, and so my soil is better. But there are farms around that's going to struggle, and there's going to be acres that have to be turned off and not farmed, and those are all choices that have to be made. We're a lot better off than other regions. I mean, there's parts of California that are off. There's parts of Idaho that are already off too. So, yeah, it's going to be more extreme, and the heat waves, sometimes get hotter, and it all depends on the year. But we have to be able to mitigate those extremes and do our best. And so that's why we've chose to go down the road we did, is to increase the organic matter so the plants can weather those storms, because they're coming. We're not free of them. So we have to be able to weather that storm.
Look, I'm going to be brutal. I'm brutal here. Look, I lived in Weiser. I was the district conservationist on the eastern side. The reality is, if you drive through Idaho during the fall and the spring, it looks like the moon. It doesn't look any different from California or any other part of the world. It looks like the moon. Why isn't the Treasure Valley and all of Idaho covered in green? Until we do that, we're not going to be able to alter the small water cycle and get more snow. Idaho looks like the moon. I've been through all of Idaho. So I'm not going to cut Idaho slack. I'm not cutting Oregon slack. I'm not cutting the whole country slack. We need to cover it. And then we start changing the whole system, because people don't understand how the water cycle functions. So I understand how that it functions. And Idaho is bare, and so it's uncovered. So we still need to work a lot in Idaho.
But prior to irrigation and us developing the infrastructure, Idaho was just a desert.
And that's correct. So how do we make it so that we stabilize that climate? We got a lot of irrigation ground. They can wet up the soil, and we have a cover. Those covers with snow, like cereal rye, hairy vetch, overwinter, don't they? And he's been doing it. Why aren't they farming like him? We can do this the whole country. We can change Idaho and make it even better for Idaho. New Mexico's the same way. Arizona's the same way. We can, with irrigated ground, we can help a lot by just covering the soil at the end of the year. It can help a lot.
So I'd expand this beyond just heat waves, but extreme climate events. The majority of our cows in Idaho are housed in open lots or open corrals. They're not in what we would call a freestall barn in the industry. And these extreme weather events are driving dairymen to put them into freestall barns. It's great news for digester docks, because you can't really make a digester function on an open lot dairy just because you don't have enough slurry, typically, depending on your average size. There's not enough slurry there to make a digester work efficiently. You put them in a freestall where you're capturing all that manure slurry, it makes a digester work. But again, it comes down to investment. That conversion from an open lot dairy to a freestall is about a $3,000 a cow investment. Again, it comes back to, this is a very capital intensive business. And to be able to have the right relationship with your lender to say, hey, I want to invest $3,000 a cow to improve my animal housing. Trust me, I'll get a return on this investment based on increased productivity, better reproduction, lower medicine use. You have to make the argument, and you've got to have a great relationship there to make that argument successful. The reality is, the average dairy farmer isn't going to go out and make that capital investment. It's just too intensive.
And that's one of the other sides of the science that we're really working on, is trying to make open lot dairies and open lot feedlots more feasible for capturing the methane and capturing the manure, and with that end product that you can apply to the soil, increase your soil health as well. So that's something else that we are trying to figure out, and because you do lose all the urine that provides a lot of that slurry, you do lose it right into the water, into the ground. So it's something we do want to focus on. We do want to make that change in the world too, because not everybody can afford to put out $3,000 per animal to create a freestall barn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Even if
final,
we don't-
final thoughts there.
Even if we don't change the infrastructure that we're talking about, look, if we can just cover the soil, please keep in mind there's a lot of sensible heat that's being reflected off the soil right now. Anybody that's ever flown into Denver, there's a reason the plane shakes like crazy and you wish, why do I fly? The hot heat, the sensible heat, the latent heat coming off the soil surface. If we can just do simple thing of just cover all the soil, planting covers, we can make a huge impact without changing any of the major infrastructure. Just get people to cover the soil. And if we can facilitate that, that would have a huge difference on the climate. And I think everybody, it's a win-win without having to have the poor dairy guy spend so much money. Cover the soil. We can make a huge impact. Look, I've been around government for a long time. Let's do one simple thing. Let's just get it covered. I'd be tickled to do that.
And I think that really comes back to a larger thing too of we all just need to work together. We've all got some sort of solution that if we all put it together, we're going to have the overarching solution. So let's put your technology, put our technology, and let's just have a conversation and figure out what's going to be the best solution. That's something we don't do very well anymore, is just have a conversation.
And I'd just say be careful what you ask for. The current trajectory of what consumers are demanding of farmers is only going to increase the average farm size. You're only going to increase consolidation. So be careful what you ask for. If you demand net zero products, it's not going to come from the small mom and pop dairy. So understand the end result of all your expectations and demands as consumers and activists.
Yeah, final thoughts over here?
Well, I just, from all this, hope that we all can get just more creative. And that, I think that's the thing is currently, I agree. But if there's ways that people can get creative, it might change, that. And I go back to on keeping the soil covered. Actually, dairies probably do the best job of keeping soil covered in Idaho because they plant triticale for feed. So they're one of the best about keeping crops in because they're trying to grow so much feed. But yeah, we have to do our best where we can. The Treasure Valley has a huge amount of diversity in crops. I don't know, it's over 100 different crops that are grown in the region. And so some of those crops take very diverse amount of tillage and stuff to make it work because of the consumer demand. But let's fit these ecological practices where we can, when we can, because it's not 100% of the time, it's not all the time. Let's do our best we can, we get creative, and let's work together.
Well, I just kind of on a more personal experience, I think about our little urban farm that I have. It's just a half acre. And my neighbor next door that, mine's basically a food forest. I basically say if you go in there for food, you have to earn your food because it's a little forest. And also thinking about how much water that I use. And my neighbor next door who has her plants in basically dirt and they're just, there's nothing growing around it, no compost, nothing like that. Or the neighbor next door that sprays pesticides, and just talking to your neighbors and doing it in an approachable way, and talking to them about your practices and trying to meet people where they're at. I think this is a larger conversation that goes right outside of our back door, or farmers, like I think I was talking to Nate and Wilder Jones about their farmers, their conventional farmers next door, and just having those conversations and just opening the door, because I think when you're approachable, people want to hear your message.
All righty, I think that's all the time we have.
It is. Thank you guys so
Well,
much.
Thank you guys.
We appreciate
Let's give a
it.
little round of applause for us.